In this episode, we're going to talk to Whitney Bromberg-Hawkings, who's the CEO and founder of FLOWERBX. And we're going to talk to her about building a global B2C brand and the challenges and opportunities of exporting that specifically to the US market.
Enabling Success for Founders and Entrepreneurial Businesses, hosted by Toby Harper.
Welcome. Thank you for participating in this podcast. Firstly, it'd be really good just to kick off with you explaining a bit about FLOWERBX, the business, and your role.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. It's great to see you. I started FLOWERBX 5 years ago. I'm the CEO and founder of FLOWERBX. I started FLOWERBX 5 years ago after working in fashion for almost 20 years. I worked for the designer Tom Ford for almost 2 decades. And I realized, first of all, as a working mom, at that point I had 2 children. I now have 3, that I was buying everything in my life online. I was buying my clothes online. I was buying my beauty online. I was buying my farm fresh groceries online. But if I wanted to buy flowers, and I didn't want a flower arrangement, I didn't want a bouquet, I would go to the Covent Garden Flower Market, usually before work. I had on stilettos and a pencil skirt because I had Tom Ford in the office at 9 o'clock in the morning. And I thought, how come there's no solution for me to buy this online? Just beautiful, fresh, single stem bunches of flowers online. And you would go to a florist and end up spending 2 or 3 times too much money and for flowers that had already sat there for 2 or 3 days. So there wasn't a real solution to buying fresh flowers for your house. I also realized that everything in the world has been branded, if you go to any brand, from Zara to Gucci in New York, in Shanghai, in London, you're getting the same branded experience. You're getting the same tissue paper. You're getting the same shopping bag. You're getting the same store staff wearing the same uniform. But with flowers, there was this real inconsistency with floral gifting. And basically, if you used any of the international providers of flowers, they would depend on local fulfillment. So they would find a local florist who would fulfill the order. And that local florist had no allegiance at all to the customer. They didn't really care what the quality of the flowers were or the quality of experience was because their name wasn't on it. So I wanted to create a branded flower, a global flower brand. So it was sort of those two sides of the business that really excited me. And the real opportunity was there to really disrupt this industry that hadn't really been disrupted.
Wow. And so what was it, looking back at the past roles that you've had, what is this sort of what were they and what experience have you sort of taken from those roles that has helped propel the company's success?
Well, I think people underestimate how hard people in fashion work. It's a pretty brutal, especially I was lucky to be at the top of the fashion industry, working with Tom at Gucci in the Gucci heyday. And then I left with him to start his eponymous brand. And it's cutthroat. It is, long hours. It's constant pursuit of perfection. It's detail, attention to detail. And it's such a fast-paced industry that I think cutting my teeth in fashion really prepared me for, I'm not sure if it's hard. I think it actually is harder because flowers die. I don't think you have the urgency with clothes that you have with flowers, but it was definitely a great school. And, working for one of the biggest perfectionists in the world and arguably one of the people that creates brand better than anyone ever has ever, it was a great way to learn how to stay consistent to the brand vision, to say no to things that didn't feel right for the brand, to, that excruciating attention to detail. So all of these were really skills that I was lucky to learn working for Tom.
And I guess all of that experience enabled you to see the importance of developing the brand, to get the business to where you wanted to get it to. But presumably the development of the brand happened in stages, there was an evolution. What was the strategy in the early days, sort of establishing the brand or, the sort of the embryonic form of the brand?
Well, I was really lucky because, having worked with press and editors for almost 20 years as I was the global director of communications for Tom. So I had a lot of relationships with the press, which, I didn't know if they would how faithful they would be and if they would really get behind me. But luckily, they were real relationships and they got behind me, which was a great way to launch a brand because when you have all of the editors in all of the magazines and newspapers writing about it and talking about it and Instagramming it, you sort of can't ask for a better launch. So we launched literally just by word of mouth, but luckily I had some good mouths out there chatting. And then, we didn't really invest in digital marketing until we had raised money externally. So that was sort of after a year and a half in. But I think sort of good old fashioned, if you have a great product, if you get it in the right hands and people are really happy, and I had luckily these really exceptional relationships, people were really happy to talk about it. But I think one thing I didn't anticipate, we launched as a B2C business. What I didn't anticipate was there would be a huge B2B opportunity, so the second the PR for Dior gets the flowers, and then they're like, oh, can you do the flowers for this lunch that we're hosting for Dior? So I quickly, saw that opportunity and built out at that point a very small events team to be able to cater for those sort of great marketing activities, but they also were a very solid revenue stream. So that was sort of an unexpected thing that happened at the beginning, but we've, leaned in on that, and it's been a really great part of our business.
That's really interesting. So you leveraged the relationships you had in PR and beyond that to get word of mouth going and get all of this sort of free exposure, it sounds like, for the business in the early days. What tips, if any, could you give somebody who hasn't necessarily at the point they're developing a business that needs to put the brand at the center of it? What tips could you give them to try and get sort of that leverage that free exposure that good PR can provide?
First of all, have a great product, because I think people recognize a great product and are very happy, especially now with social media, to be sort of evangelical about a great product. You can have a mediocre product and no one's going to talk about it. It doesn't matter if you're paying, it doesn't matter if you're sending them free stuff, they're not going to talk about it. So I think it's really important to have a great product. Then I think it's important to have, and it doesn't need to be influencers. I hate that word anyway, but just a handful of people that have some authenticity, talking about your product. So even if it's a good friend who has great taste and has 300 or 400 followers, but if she's, send it to that person, get that, and that person's going to be happy to talk about it if it's a wonderful product. So I think just start small.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And so you talked a bit about Dior and how that opportunity came about, and obviously partnering with luxury brands has been from the outside in, at least, a big part of the success in sort of building the brand, at least globally. Can you tell us a bit about that and how they came about and how you chose the brands to work with? Were you sort of knocking down doors, or were they coming to you? How did that all materialize?
So lucky that I haven't approached anyone. I think since I worked in brand, and I realized that when you wanted to execute, so, when I worked at Tom Ford Beauty, say, and we were doing the launch of a tuberose fragrance, then it was my job to find a florist in Milan, a florist in London, a florist in Paris, a florist in New York, who could execute, whether it's a cocktail that we were going to do in every city, or whether it was a lunch, a client lunch we were going to do in every city. But then it was my job to make sure we had a consistent experience in each city, which was impossible because you're sitting there, the Italian florist is telling you to send a fax, the New York florist is doing their little flourish. So it's like, to get that consistency, a brand was impossible. So I realized early on that what brands, people in my position as heads of communications or heads of PR for those brands, it's great for them because they have one person who's doing a brief, one company that's executing it in different territories, so they can get this consistency of their brand. For example, we just did a send out for Cartier to 500 people. We're doing next week a send out for Zimmermann to 350 people. And what they want is consistency. So people in New York and on the East Coast of the US, and the people in London and the people in Paris and the people in the West Coast of the US are all having a consistent experience, and they're opening the same box, the same box with the same bouquet, with the same Zimmermann flourish. So I think, we're the only people that can do that. We're literally the only people that can do that. So we're leaning in on sort of our ability to execute. And we're not outsourcing it. We are fulfilling it in all of those territories. So it's our people, it's our quality control, it's our, packers, it's our delivery drivers. So there's a consistent experience. And
are you utilizing those opportunities on a sort of a loss leader basis? So are you actually charging on normal commercial terms?
They are all paying full margin for them.
Wow.
Absolutely not money on those. Yeah, absolutely not. And so many people were like, oh, can you do that for free? 100% no. I have to buy the flowers. I have investors. I'm not telling my investors I'm giving away flowers. 100% not. And not only that, we're making margin. I mean, we're not doing anything for free. I mean, that's not the business.
No. I mean, it's amazing, but so you get to associate your own business, your own brand with these well-known luxury brands, and as you say, you're sort of operating on a full margin basis, and that's a real testament, obviously, to the product and the way that you built the business and the way that you can fulfill the needs of these brands. It's really impressive.
Really great value because of our business model. We have a negative working capital business model, so we aren't sitting on stock. If you go to our warehouse right now, there's nothing in our warehouse. And tomorrow morning's flowers will come in tomorrow morning at 4:00 in the morning. We repackage, recondition, quality control, and send them out tomorrow morning. So we're not sitting on stock. They know, the brands now know that, and they're getting quality you can't get anywhere else. They're getting value you can't get anywhere else because they're not paying for bricks and mortar store. They're not paying for 40% wasted flowers. They're not paying for any excess. It's as lean as it can possibly be. So I think for them, they're getting value too.
And FLOWERBX is a truly global business, isn't it? How many markets are you in globally?
We're in 23 countries in Europe, and then now the east and west coast of the US. So at the center of the US, much to my chagrin. Because so we just closed a fundraising round to launch for full US coverage, hopefully early next year.
Well, and presumably expanding globally, comes with challenges, choosing the right markets to pursue, and the timing of all of that. How have you tackled all of that, and how have you chosen the markets to go after first? I mean, America's presumably got to be the biggest market for this, isn't it? But
it's definitely the biggest market, but it's also where I think a lot of people trip up. From my experience and my chatting with other founders and investors, everyone's like, America can make you or America can break you. So I think, but luckily, we launched last year and the brand has definitely landed. We're doing sort of year 4 UK numbers in year 1 in the US. So I think the back to the B2B, area of the business I was mentioning, that's a great tool. If you have Cartier sending to their 400 top clients, then you're getting in the hands of the right people. And sort of that's a great way to launch the brand. So we're seeing encouraging early traction in the US, but there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, well, good luck with it.
Thanks.
Yeah, and so, when you originally sort of started thinking about the brand and what it might stand for, were you even in those early days thinking about a brand that would be portal globally, that would be exportable outside of the UK into Europe and beyond that? And for other founders of businesses where they are thinking about building a brand that's exportable, what are the tips that you might give them that maybe you adopted in those early days?
So 100%, I didn't leave my career to go and be a florist. That wasn't the 100%. The whole point was that always needed to be a global solution, because Interflora and 1-800-Flowers were such horrible solutions that I wanted to create a great solution that was international and global, and that people, that I knew could use as sort of global citizens. So yes, the international component was always key to what I was doing. Tips. I think build a strong brand. Like, the brand has to be strong, or the brand's not going to mean anything. So before you can make a brand, a global brand or an international brand or a recognizable brand, you need to have a strong brand. So I would say invest in the marketing. I mean, the sort of logo, the icon, make sure it's solid, because look at all the great brands. You can recognize them from down the street, whether it's their icon or their logo, from Apple to Nike so create really a strong brand identity before you can even think about growing it. Yeah.
This might be a silly question, but presumably there's language barriers to tackle. And I know FLOWERBX is FLOWERBX. Does flower, presumably the word, that translates globally? People understand that and what you do. And you talked about digital marketing. Obviously, that's an important part of that. Sometimes you find these global brands with random words that they adopt as their brand name.
Well, I mean, the reality is the reason we called it FLOWERBX was because we couldn't buy FLOWERBX anywhere because it was already taken. But then I sort of liked, the same way Spanx is sort of a disruptive way of, spelling. It's a disruptive product and a disruptive way of spelling it. So I sort of liked the disruptive nature of the spelling, which sort of represented what we were doing. And I wanted it to become a noun, almost like a made up word, so I didn't get flowers. I got a flower box, which is like a completely different experience. So luckily we're on our way, I think, to getting there.
Yeah, great. So finally, Whitney, what's the one thing you do as a leader that contributes, do you think, the most to the business's success?
I really have an insane amount of energy pursuing the vision that I have, which is so clear to me. And I think I'm very good at sharing that story with the team and bringing them on board with where we're going with it. So I think even on really exhausting or really tedious days, that everyone sees where the North Star is for the business and feels part of what we're doing.
And energy is contagious, isn't it?
Great. Yeah, I've got lots of it because I'm so excited. And it's so totally fulfilling to see tangible results of what you're doing, or to, I was driving this morning and I saw a FLOWERBX van drive by and I was like, oh my gosh, like we're creating something that wasn't out there before. So that's super, fulfilling.
Amazing. Yeah, great. Really appreciate you taking the time, Whitney. Thank you for the contribution.
Thank you so much for having me. And sorry I couldn't be there in person.
Oh, no problem.
Okay, have a great day.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for listening. I hope you found it useful and informative. Please follow us and hopefully we'll see you on the next one.